So the session today is on making your website ADA compliant. So I'm a web developer and an open source enthusiast. I work basically in web accessibility and usability. And today we are going to learn about web accessibility, and then we'll go towards ADA and laws and legislation rules which are similar to ADA, and we'll see how we are going to tackle them in future. So web accessibility means that people with disabilities can use the web, and there are a lot of statistics which I'm going to show you today which will change your perspective to see a website. 1990. Who remember this year? I mean, that can be your birth year. So is it your birth year? Okay. Okay. But it is a most significant year in terms of accessibility, because this year was the year for ADA, that is Americans with Disabilities Act. So in this year, there was a lot of amendments documented there in America, and that's why this year is registered in the history. So what is Americans with Disabilities Act? So there is a huge documentation on the internet, but the summary is just like these 5 lines. And it is something like no individual should be discriminated on the basis of disability in the full and equal employment of goods, maybe facilities, privileges, or accommodation of any places of public accommodation by any person who owns or leases and operates a place of public accommodation. But when we were in 1990, the places of public accommodation, or the places where our businesses were, mostly are on the ground. After 1990 till 2018, a lot of businesses has already been transferred to internet. So you see all vendor stores or e-commerce today on internet. And the definition of place of public accommodation has now been changed. It was confusing for everyone with the ADA Act, that what do you mean by place of accommodation? And they think like, you know, this kind of ADA only applies to ground places, but not to the websites or internet. But when the case of Winn-Dixie appeared in 2017, where the court in US states that Winn-Dixie website is inaccessible to visually impaired individuals, and therefore Winn-Dixie has violated the ADA because inaccessibility of its website has denied, and Winn-Dixie has to apply a lot of money again to make its website, because it was forced by the court to make it compliant enough before coming to the production. So it's not only about America. There are these places all over the world where there are acts, but with different names. In Australia, the same act is Disability Discrimination Act, or you can say there is an act called AODA in Ontario, and the world is going towards accessibility now. But how to solve this problem? Well, whether they are 10x, 20x, or 25x, all of these acts follow a certain pattern of guidelines. As a fact, I want to tell you that ADA does not come up with a certain kind of guidelines. They're still working on it. But to prepare us for future, W3C, which has written the rules of internet, has given us some guidelines which applies to all the acts all around the world. We call these guidelines WCAG or WCAG, or Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And to solve the problem of ADA, or to solve the problem of any act, maybe that will be in India in future, or maybe it is in Singapore, or maybe it is in US or UK, these guidelines apply to all. So we are going to look at these guidelines today, and we'll see how we can make our websites more accessible to our users using these guidelines. So these are the places in which WCAG or WCAG 2.0 has already been followed. If you see India as red mark, it is because WCAG should be followed in India in government institutes, but it has not been applied to private organizations still. But in Europe and in UK, it has been applied to private organizations as well. Before we dive into WCAG, let's see some use cases why we are studying this. Well, meet Kyle. Kyle is vision disabled, which means Kyle cannot access the information and cannot read anything on internet. Kyle is a student, so he wants to purchase an online course, but whenever he goes to any website on internet, he finds it's very difficult to understand what is there, and he can't get anything because 90% of the websites on internet are not accessible, or they are not prepared for screen readers. So Kyle have no option. So he's like, I don't want to use these websites. I may purchase a course offline if it is available. Gordon is having motor disability, which means Gordon feels it very frustrated when he uses mouse. So he uses mouse stick instead of mouse, but Gordon also realizes the fact that we as developers only consider mouse as one of the best options, and this is the thing that is in our mind, that most of our users are using mouse. But people like Gordon don't use mouse, they use mouse sticks. Curtis is another example. Curtis is having hearing disability. So if you don't have captions in your videos, for Curtis, the video is of no use, because for Curtis, he relies on his own intuition when it comes to the video. So I'm not talking about Gordon, I'm not talking about Kyle, I'm not talking about Curtis, I'm talking about 217 million people on this planet who are dealing with same problem, and out of which 37 million people are blind, and the statistics are increasing each and every year. But why should we still study these rules? Is it just empathy or something else? While I have already given you the case of ADA, so you understand the point of legislation in future. But there are two more cases which come into existence. One is the empathy, which means if I as a user is able to use the web, why that person should not be able to use the web? The second point, which is core for us, is business. Why we should lose 217 million people on the planet who are facing certain kind of disability, and why we should give our competitors a chance so that they can go to their websites if their websites are accessible. So how we think of using web? Mouse or keyboard, right? So we think like everybody is using either mouse or either keyboard. But the truth is not that. People use web with a lot of things like screen readers, mouse sticks, headbands, and switches. But there are a lot of other options apart from these as well. So which type of disabilities I am talking about? This can be hyperactivity disorder, or this can be hearing problems. This can be physical disability, or this can be brain injuries. These are the most specific ones, but the list never ends. So we have input and we have websites. Even if you are a CEO of a company, or even if you are a developer, when you understand user agent, you understand it's just like Chrome, Mozilla, Firefox. Even we don't take care about IE, right? But the user agents are not only these. There is other user agents. These are the things that people are using, which they call screen readers. And these are the screen readers which are most popular nowadays. But there are a lot. Okay, you understand browsers, so you talk about responsiveness day and night, but there are another kind of thing which I have told you right now, that is a screen reader. But still there are magnifiers, the magnification devices, as user agents. People are using them as well. How WCAG solves this problem? So you have already seen the option of accessibility devices with us. Now, if you are developing a website, how you are going to solve this problem? WCAG gives us 4 important principles: perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. Now, all of these principles have their own success criteria. Now, each of them comes with their own success criteria, which means there are some pointers which we need to think about, and if we come across all those pointers and if we check all those pointers, we achieve each and every principle. Finally, when we achieve all the principles together, we say we have achieved ADA compliance or WCAG compliance. Each of these principles come with their own compliance levels. For example, each of them are grouped into 3 categories: A, AA, or AAA. A compliance means the things you must need to achieve, while AA gives you a choice, maybe achieve it or not, while AAA is so difficult to achieve, but it would be good if you can achieve that. So let's go into the first principle, that is perceivable. Perceivable means information and UI components which are presented to the users should be perceivable for the users without any loss to the information. And that is the definition provided by W3C. So for example, let's take an example of alt text, and everybody knows alt text, I believe. So whenever you have an image, it is always recommended to have alt text, right? But there are websites like Facebook in which you upload an image and it is so difficult on these websites using machine learning or something to detect the immediate alternative text, because images are generated dynamically there. So for example, if you're stuck into a problem where you can't decide about the alt text, make alt text as empty. Otherwise, if you don't write the alt text, when screen reader come across the screen, it starts reading the URL of the SRC, something like https://amazon.com, something. Just think about what user experience you are providing to your user if screen reader is reading the URL. So it is clear that if you have an alt text, provide an alt text. If you don't have an alt text, write alt text as blank. The second part in perceivable is pre-recorded audio. Pre-recorded audio, there are a lot of services already available on the internet. Some of them are commercial services and some of them are automated services. You need to generate the captions. So if you upload a video to YouTube today, it automatically generates the transcripts for your video. Also, you have an open source software called OTranscribe, which you can just go and download and can write your transcripts there. There are some commercial services like Scribby. You need to go to the Scribby website and can generate transcripts for your audios. But it's super important as a piece of guideline to understand that whenever you have an audio, you also have a transcript corresponding to the audio. The next part is the video. So if you have video, there is always an option to generate a transcript and embed it inside the video tag inside the HTML. And what you can do is you can generate a file with the WebVTT extension and can write the sentences with the timings about your video, and then can include it inside your HTML with a track tag. And here, if you can see here, I have just included it like src subtitles _en.vtt. The next point inside perceivable is color contrast. How many of you have faced the problem to decide the foreground and background color on site in your website? Be honest, please. Correct. Now, every time you do this, every time you just go and change and see, okay, this looks good, this does not, this looks good, this does not. Finally, you'll end up with a combination which suits your needs. But you forget about those users who have vision problems or who can't differentiate between colors, who are colorblind. So if somebody is having low vision problem, the guidelines suggest to have specific ratios which can work for them as well. And they are having their own compliance levels, means A, AA or AAA. Now there are color contrast ratio softwares on internet which you can just go and explore. You just need to put a foreground color, you just need to put the compliance level, and it will give you the background color which match with the guideline. So color contrast checker is one of the software which you should use every time you talk about colors. The next guideline is the orientation, which means content does not restrict its view. There are some people who can't move the neck just like you. I mean, if you are in the landscape mode, they can't move their face in the portrait mode. So don't force your users with a certain orientation, and always write media queries so that they can just explore different kind of orientations. The next part is resize text and say no to pixels. Now, when I was not aware of these guidelines, I was always writing font sizes in pixels, right? And I know most of you are doing that too. The problem is when you use a magnifier, pixels are not scaled up. So for those who are using magnifiers like zoom in, zoom out, they can't work with pixels. So either use EM, that is a relative unit, or use percentages when you are talking about font sizes. The next guideline after perceivable is operable. And operable means interface elements in the content must be operable. Very simple, right? The first thing inside operable is a screen reader. So this is a common mistake I have seen in a lot of websites. Most of us don't understand and take care of labels. Even I have given the example by putting a label tag, most of us skip it, right? But the label tag is super important because when a screen reader goes through your code, it just understand the input box as per its label. So here if you just go with this piece of code, though it will work, but it will work something like that. And it will, when the screen reader will walk through, it will speak edit text blank. Though it is speaking something, but it does not telling the correct information. It should tell something like enter your username here instead of edit text blank. So the mistake in this code, and if you can see there is 4 equal to username and then name equal to username, right? Instead of that, what you need to do is 4 equals to username and ID equals to username instead of name equals to username. So the 4 inside the label and the ID inside the input should match, and then the screen reader will be happy and will say like username edit text. So if somebody is blind and is using a screen reader, is going through this piece of code which you have written using the screen reader, he'll get like enter your username or username edit text. This is a kind of a skip navigation functionality, and if you can see it here, the point which I'm making here is there are people on this planet who just use keyboard instead of mouse. So they are relying on tab and shift tab to go forward, shift tab to go backward, and when they start tabbing your website, they land up on the main content area after a long period of time if your navigation bar is too long, because that person has to navigate through each and every element on the navigation bar, which is a time waste for him, and he feels frustrated. So the functionality which I'm talking about here is called skip navigation functionality, which lets your user directly to explore your main content area instead of going to the navigation. So how to design that functionality? What you need to do is you need to write a class in CSS called skip link, and you need to write top as -200 pixels for that class, which means the menu, the skip content bar which I'm making will not appear on the page at front. It will be something -200 pixel off the page. But whenever somebody focus with the tab, if you can see the next code which is written like skip link on focus, it will go to the top 0 position from -200 pixels. So the skip to content link you are seeing in the image here that's why important, because when the user hit tab, skip to content will appear, and then he will click enter and will directly navigate to the main content area instead of landing up with this navigation bar. This is very interesting, and I want to tell you a story about this. Div is not equal to button. So what happens is whenever we get a design from our designer, we get very fancy designs, and every time we want to make the same design because we want to prove our developer skills. So what we do is we say, oh, button is very bad design, so just remove button, place a div and style it properly so that it looks just like a mock-up. We show it to our designer, and designer gets impressed from us because we have done the work correctly. But if you remove the button and if you replace it with a division, you have lost a lot of accessibility content. A button does not work, a div does not work with a screen reader, and when a screen reader navigates to a division, it will just skip it because it does not understand that it should contain the button accessibility features. So never use div instead of buttons, and remember it as a principle. Okay, the next part in the operable is low vision impairment. So there are people on this planet who are dealing with low vision problems. Even if you have spectacles like me, you can be one of them. As a fact, 1 out of every 10 in the audience is dealing with certain kind of disability, right? And then if you go to this particular website, which I have just used extension called Chrome Shades, which lets you walk through the whole part and will give you a glimpse how a person with low vision see this website. So this is a kind of person who can't see the left part of the website, and there are person who can't see the diagonal part of the website. There are person who can't see the center part of the website. But just make sure that there are a lot of person who can't see the edges, so your content should not be on the edges, and that's why margin and padding are super important. The other part which I want to tell you is, don't rely on color. Color are not the necessary information. Color are just additional information. If a person is colorblind and if you are showing a person that, red means this and green means this, for that person, red and green are same. So, and he can't differentiate. Always use text along with colors and use colors just to provide additional info. Care about seizures. Now I'm going to give you an example of what happened in 1987 with the Pokemon cartoon in Japan, Tokyo. 617 children were admitted to the hospital on the single day just because there was certain kind of neural activity happened in the brain of all those children because of which we call seizures today. And as a fact, if you show an animation or a flash 3 times in a single second, it can cause seizure to anyone. So just make sure on your website you should not show 3 flashes in a single second because it may damage others. The next part is proper inputs. Though if you can see this screen and the piece of code on the left, there is something called visually hidden class, and then it contains required, and there is a star, and it contains input element after it. The way I have written 4 lines instead of just 2 lines is because I don't want my screen reader to read it like first name star. So if you want to avoid and provide a better experience to your users, what you need to do is you need to go to the star part and have to write aria hidden equals to true. The aria hidden equals to true makes sure that whenever screen reader is going through this code, it will skip this part while reading. While you want your users to see first name on the screen, but you want your person who can't see the screen to get required when the screen reader is speaking. So in the code you will see visually hidden class, which means it will hide it from your users who can see, but screen reader can read the required part and will not read the aria hidden equal to true, which is the star. So sometimes it is better to write repetitive code. The next part is focus visible. This is the most important line any developer will write in CSS whenever a design challenge comes to him. Anchor, outline none. Because this will save a lot of those blue boxes on the input and will make the page better in terms of design, but worst in terms of accessibility. Writing outline equals to none removes the focus, and whenever somebody taps through keyboard, it never reaches the input and it does not give any information to your users which input to tackle, and it does not even give the active input element. So if somebody is tabbing, he can never reach any point because he'll never realize which input element he is on. So remove the practice of writing this in CSS and try to find an alternative using JavaScript or something which don't force you to write this inside your CSS to have good design practices. Okay, the next part inside the operable is allow time independent interaction. So whenever you see something on the screen like session is going to expire, so you can just do that task in 30 seconds, but there are people who are very slow with keyboard and mouse or may have some kind of disabilities and they are not able to perform the same task with the same precision and accuracy in the same given time interval as you can. So the guidelines suggest to have 3 options every time: turn off, adjust, and extend. So whenever you reach the end point saying like 6 seconds remaining, just give your users an option, press a space to increase the time. And whenever your user presses the space, you should increase the timer as per his choice. That is called allow time independent interaction. Providing control to your users. To avoid seizures or to avoid any kind of problems with the flashes, it is always recommended to provide your users a control of your screen. If you have a video element or a carousel at the front of your web page, always try to provide 3 inputs like pause, resume, or stop. And that will give your users more capability of controlling your websites rather than you. Okay, the next part which we need to understand is called understandable. Now, understandable has its own principles. So we have covered perceivable, operable, and this is the third one, understandable. Understandable comes with 2 major principles. The one is making web pages readable. Now, you don't understand the meaning of putting language as English. So somebody, maybe some of us can skip lang equals to en. But when it goes to Braille encoding, it really helps those accessibility devices to encode English language with the Braille codes. So if a person who can't see is using Braille, he can get the information very easily if you have written this language tag, maybe en or fr for French, or maybe some other language. So always make sure that you are specifying the language of the page inside the HTML root element. Input assistance. This is very simple, but sometimes we don't focus on it. The input assistance suggests that whenever you go from one input to other, always give your users the information about what is wrong in filling up that input. And this really helps not only with disabled people, but accessibility in general. Because if you are providing this information, this is making your website more usable and user-friendly. The next part is making web pages predictable. Though I understand that this is going to be challenging, but if you can see, if you are focusing on a particular button or focusing on a particular input element, and if you change the context of the page just by focus, it is totally confusing for many users. So don't change the context of the page if you are focusing or if you are typing any input element. So if you are key pressing on a button or focusing on a button, don't change the context of the button. That's what understandable principle says. The last principle we have is called robust. Now, robust is very simple and very difficult, and you will get it why I'm saying so. So the robust principle just have this kind of guideline which says content must be robust enough that it can be interpreted by wide range of variety of user agents, including assistive technologies, which means you are preparing your websites for future. And if you are taking an example of Amazon Echo, or if you are taking an example of Google Home, what you are doing is you are preparing your website for working with these voice recognition techniques because they are the future. So the robust principle says whatever you are coding today should apply to future as well, and should apply to all assistive technologies which are coming up in future. So this is a bit challenging because we don't know what is going to come in future. The next part, which is very easy in robust, is markup should pass all the HTML5 validator checks, and also IDs should be unique. This seems very simple, right? IDs should be unique, but if you go to any big website, you will see the same IDs everywhere. So whenever I end up my session, I give more power to my users. And this time my point is tools. So I'm going to provide a list of tools which will help you to just check where your website is today, and then how you can make certain amendments inside your website so that it is prepared for ADA compliance. So here we go, tools for accessibility testing. The first tool I'm going to give you is Accessibility Chrome extension. You can just go and download this extension today, and the benefit of doing that is you can analyze your page right now here. And this tool is very good because it gives you the whole context of your page in a very beautiful manner, which we call accessibility tree. So it gives you which content on your page is not accessible and which is, and also what you can do to make it accessible. So this is a kind of tree it gives here. So here it gives you a tree which is saying the role is button, the area labeled by is not specified, and the area label is not specified. Though we are not going into area labeled by and area label, but when you learn more accessibility principles, you will understand why there is a need to specify them which are not specified here. The next tool, and I love this tool, though it is a paid service and I'm not here to promote it, but this tool is tenonio. The tenonio is a tool where you can just put your website and it gives you the whole list of checks that your website is bad here, the website is good here. And the best part is you can integrate it with your CI and CDs. And after that, once you access your website, you get a full screen report with different pie charts, and you can explore it like which are the issues in my website, and it also gives you some recommendations where you need to improve. As you can see here, the green and the red pie charts. This is the color combination tool. You can directly go to colorsafe.co and can talk about color contrast. So this is a tool that gives you the foreground and background check. As you can see here, if you see the last part, it is saying WCAG standard, in which you can apply AAA, AA, or single A compliance levels. Whenever you apply compliance level, it will give you the way of foreground and background matching according to that. As per ADA, you should apply for AA compliance everywhere because AAA compliance is so difficult to achieve and A is almost nothing to achieve. So just go for AA. So whenever you talk about any rule or whatever guideline I'm showing you in the whole presentation is compliant with AA. This is the most favorite one. It's called totalwire, and it is by Khan Academy. It is an open source free tool. The best part about this tool is it is very easy to install. So it is just like a bookmark which you can bake to your website. And if you can see here, it really gives things which are very easy to understand. It says you are missing labels. It says your label is missing this part, or it says your color combinations are wrong, or it says this type of users will not be able to access your website. So this totalwire tool is very good, and you should explore it. I have provided the link at the bottom here too. Google has done a lot of work in past years and came up with something called Chrome Audit. Now you can find Audits tab inside your developer tools as well. So you can just go to the Audits tab and can run your audit for your website and can get the report to where are you lacking and what should you improve. And this is a whole report which you get from audits applying to all accessibility rules and also giving good suggestions and the compliance level of each and every rule. So what we learned today? Why we need ADA, guidelines for ADA. So even if you are talking about only ADA or you are talking about all the acts around the world, they all are applied to these guidelines. So the best part would be to prepare yourself for future, and if you are having right now any website, just go and check what things you are lacking on those websites and how much effort you require to make them WCAG or ADA or any act that I have shown on the map compliant. We have gone through WCAG 2.0 overview. As a fact, WCAG 2.1. So the slides I have shown you are WCAG 2.1. Which is launched after 10 years in 2018. So WCAG 2 was released in 2008, and then WCAG 2.1 is released after 10 years. And because there is a lot of change, there are a lot of changes in these 10 years on internet, hence 2.0 and 2.1 are very different. We went through the 4 principles of WCAG 2.1, that is perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust, with the certain success criteria along with their compliance levels. And then finally, we learned about tools for testing accessibility. So finally, we'll end up with this kind of graph where you can remember all the things which we have covered. We have covered alt text, captioning, contrast ratios, orientation, Seizures, time-independent interactions, give user more controls, resizing screen text, skip navigation, keyboard navigation, making web pages readable, making web pages predictable, giving unique IDs all over the pages, validating your HTML content with a validator, and finally, error handling by providing your user input about what they are doing wrong. So what should be your next steps? Your next step is to just go and run a Chrome audit, because that is the super easy way to check where you are. You can explore more tools which I have given on the presentation, and then you can just go and check which tool suits you the most. You can integrate an automated test with tenonio. Then whenever you deploy your application, it just go through the accessibility test and can give you a glimpse where you are lacking. You can fix issues by following the rules of perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust success criteria, and can finally achieve ADA compliance. You can follow any accessibility community to get the updates where we are. And the best would be to go to w3c.org and can get the whole list of communities there. Okay, so I am done with this whole presentation, and I'm looking forward to your questions. You can scan the QR code, or you can just ask me for the slides if you want. Thank you so much, and any questions?
Are there any more guidelines for more complicated websites that are more advanced than the basic HTML?
So if you talk about WCAG rules, it generally applies to HTML things, because the whole accessibility tree is driven by markup on the page. So whenever you come across accessibility problems, they are generally related with your DOM that has been implemented inside the web page. If you are thinking about JS, JavaScript part or something like that, yes, if you can see the functionalities which I have provided here called skip navigation, they can be done with JS as well, but there are certain functionalities which should be focused with JavaScript, which I have not covered in the presentation, but I can give you the links which you can explore. So apart from that fact, those rules which I have covered in these 4 principles are sufficient if you want to make your website WCAG compliance.
Thank you.